Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, November 27th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Republican Representative David Valadao has managed to represent his Valley district for years, despite obstacles.
Valadao was just downright real about the whole situation, and I agreed with him all 110%.
Coming up, we hear a report about why voters keep electing him and what he might face when he returns to Washington in January. But first, today's headlines. There's a new twist in the race for California's 13th congressional district. The latest vote totals released Tuesday now have Democrat Adam Gray leading by just over 100 votes. This is the first time Gray has led over Republican incumbent John Duarte. The race has been razor thin as votes continue to be tallied from Election Day. House District 13 covers much of the northern San Joaquin Valley. It's one of the closest House races in the country and also one of the last to be called. A Fresno County resident has died of rabies. Health officials suspect a bat bit the patient in Merced County. They're now tracking down others who may have been exposed. Rabies is a deadly virus that attacks the nervous system. Most human cases are caused by bats, though any mammal can carry the virus. The CDC says rabies is easily treatable before symptoms start to appear. If you've recently been in contact with bats and have a bite or a scratch, experts say it's imperative to visit a doctor for treatment. Bakersfield Congressman Vince Fong says he is not impressed by Governor Gavin Newsom's recent visits to the Valley. Newsom visited Fresno last week and a low-emissions cement plant in Kern County on Monday. He talked up his new blueprint for job growth at both stops. But Fong and other Valley Republicans called the visits a, quote, rebranding tour and blamed Democratic policies for the region's lagging economy. Newly elected representatives in California's state legislature will be sworn into office next week. Cap Radio's Laura Fitzgerald reports that a record number of legislators are women.
Women will make up about half of California's state legislature.
It's a massive milestone. It's such fast progress. And, just less than a decade ago, women were barely 1 out of 5 members.
Susanna Delano is executive director of Close the Gap. The organization works to support progressive women in their run for state office. A vast majority of these new women lawmakers and the Legislative Women's Caucus are Democrats.
But one of the distinguishing features of women's leadership is that they cross the aisle more frequently, more easily. They really look for collaborative solutions, and I think you see that reflected in the caucus leadership.
California has yet to see its first woman governor. In order for this to happen, Delano says women need to keep running for office. In Sacramento, I'm Laura Fitzgerald.
The Fresno County Sheriff is objecting to new bail fees introduced by the County Superior Court. The court has reduced bail fees for some felonies to $0. But Sheriff John Zanoni is calling for greater accountability for certain offenders. His biggest concern is bail waivers for people suspected of assaulting jail employees. Zanoni told Fox 26 that in some cases, bail amounts dropped by $15,000. Court officials did not return the station's request for comment.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, part of the Prieto Automotive family, with special holiday financing deals on select models through the end of the year at the new showroom on Blackstone and Barstow. Information at myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. U.S. Representative David Valadao is returning to Congress for a 6th term in January. The Republican incumbent beat his Democratic challenger, Rudy Salas, in a rematch for the House District 22 seat last week. Time after time, Valadao has overcome tough odds to secure a win. He represents a Latino-majority district that includes Delano and parts of Hanford and Bakersfield. The 22nd district leans heavily blue, and this year, Democrats spent millions of dollars trying to flip the seat. KVPR's Joshua Yeager visited Valadao's hometown of Hanford to find out what voters now want from Valadao and from a Republican-led government in Washington.
It's a crisp morning in downtown Hanford, California. City crews are putting up a Christmas tree and ice skating rink in the town plaza.
Well, I shine shoes.
And Calvin Ross is working away at his shoe shining booth.
It's been here ever since I was a kid, 8 years old.
Now in his 70s, Ross says business isn't what it used to be.
Well, it's really, really slow these days. It's very, very slow.
Turned off by President-elect Donald Trump's wealth and immigration policies, Ross says this year he voted for Vice President Kamala Harris. But he's still hopeful Trump 2.0 can turn the economy around, and that would bring in more customers.
With Trump being back in office, maybe things will get better because people are going to start spending money and things, I believe. I really do believe that.
Like many here in California's Central Valley, Ross's votes don't track neatly along party lines. On this year's ballot, he also supported the Republican incumbent David Valadao for Congress. Valadao was one of just 10 Republicans to vote to impeach Trump in 2021 for inciting an insurrection. And that impressed Ross.
Valadao was just downright and real about the whole situation. And I agreed with him all 110%.
But some Hanford conservatives like Liz Wagner, who was heading to a nearby post office, disapproved of that vote.
Very, very disappointed.
But she still voted for the incumbent.
Valadao is at least pro-life and he has conservative values.
But with Trump heading back to the White House, it's not clear if his impeachment vote could come back to haunt him. Valadao is one of just 2 from the original 10 still hanging on.
I have a cynical answer for you.
Michael Alt is a political science professor at CSU Bakersfield.
I do think that Trump sort of relishes making people bend the knee for him.
He says Trump, though, should be grateful. For more than a decade, Valadao's held down this region, which on paper seems like it should be a lock for the other side. Democrats spent millions trying to flip this seat with seemingly little to show for it. Many voters say that's because Valadao hasn't swung to ideological extremes.
The economy matters. And I think that was a message that Valadao hit hard.
Maria Perez owns a nearby salon and agreed. She wants to see financial assistance for first-time homebuyers from Trump and the Republican majority.
That would significantly help because I'm looking to buy a house, but it's tough. My parents just moved to Colorado.
But some of Trump's other proposals, like increasing tariffs, could have a negative impact on the economy, according to some analysts. Back at the shoe shine booth, a customer from a nearby naval air base drops off a pair of boots. Ross begins working polish into them. Then he picks up a heat gun from his tray of tools.
The heat's going to melt this polish that I'm putting on the shoe down into the leather. Be very careful with the heat, though.
In many ways for this district, politics is a lot like shoe shining. Some heat is good, but if it's too extreme, you'll burn the leather. For KVPR News, I'm Joshua Yeager in Hanford.
And Joshua joins us now to talk about his reporting a little further. Hey, Joshua.
Hey, Liz.
I loved the shoe shining analogy at the end there. And first, I want to ask about Calvin Ross, who was shining the shoes there in Hanford. What made you want to center your story around him?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, he's just really emblematic of a lot of the voters in these really tight rural congressional districts in the San Joaquin Valley. He voted for Kamala Harris this go around, is no big fan of Trump, and yet he also voted for David Valadao, who's the Republican. And so these split ballots, you don't really see them too much in other parts of the country. Some political analysts have kind of called that phenomenon Valleycrats, referring to, residents here in the Valley who may be registered Democrat, but maybe you can't count on them to the same degree to turn out for Democrats compared to, say, Los Angeles or San Francisco.
With the experts with whom you spoke, do any of them expect Valadao to experience any type of pushback from Trump now that he's about to become president again, since Valadao voted to impeach Trump?
Well, Liz, that's really the big question at this point. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't answer precisely, but, we've seen Trump certainly retaliate against other Republicans in the party that he doesn't deem to be loyal enough. Whether that will happen in this district, I think, is a big open question, because on some level, it does seem like Valadao was able to succeed in this district that, at least on paper, runs very heavily blue, very heavily Democrat. So the fact that he's been able to be the congressman in this region for, more than a decade at this point, despite a lot of numbers stacked against him, that's something that I would imagine Republicans are going to be grateful for as they head into next year with potentially a very, very slim majority in the House of Representatives.
Sure, it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. Have you been able to reach Valadao's office at all? Have they made any sort of public statements about Trump since he won the election?
Well, we tried to reach out to his office a few times for the story and didn't hear back. My guess is he's keeping a lower profile for the reasons that we just discussed. I mean, with Trump heading into the White House next year, that could potentially make things tough if he chooses to be vindictive against Valadao, but there's no evidence at this point that that will happen. And the analysts I spoke to seem to think that, Valadao can hold his own. He's already been doing that for the past decade or so. He's shown that he can sort of overcome these challenges to be a successful politician, despite some obstacles.
KVPR's Joshua Yeager. Always nice to chat. Thanks for this reporting and have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thanks so much, Liz. You too.
And that does it for today's show. For the rest of the week, we will be taking a break from episodes for the Thanksgiving holiday, but we will be back on Monday. Producer Jonathan Linden and I would like to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate. We are nearing 3 months of episodes of Central Valley Daily and are truly thankful for you and your support of the show. If you ever have feedback for the podcast or a story idea, you can always feel free to email us at podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
No matter what happens in Washington, the NPR Politics Podcast is here for you. For the latest news, insights, and analysis from the election and beyond, listen to the NPR Politics Podcast.